So today I have asked Fatu to come here, a person of faith, to come and talk about a very important subject, and that is forgiveness.
Thank you, Cindy, for inviting me to this interview. What a great opportunity to come and, bring up this topic of forgiveness. Forgiveness is a pretty weighty word, but we all have experienced some type of degree of forgiveness. I work with a lot of kids. I have 3 boys of my own. And kids, to them, they can forgive really fast.
Right.
It's just who they are. Kids are always moving from one thing to another. When we get older, we kind of, struggle to forgive. And we think a little bit too much about forgiveness, whether to forgive somebody or not. I've had my experience of, people forgiving me or me forgiving other people. Desmond Tutu, who's a world-renowned theologian, said, "Forgive others, not because they deserve forgiveness, but because you deserve peace." In the video with your father, he said that he made you cry. How'd that make you feel?
In that video, I never actually really heard him ever apologize in my life or even admit that he had done anything up until the time I started writing my book. So I wasn't expecting him to even acknowledge and say, "I made you cry." But when I did hear it, I was actually so profoundly upset by it and shocked that I threw my arms up in the middle of recording, and I looked at the videographer and I was like, "Really?" And I think they had to cut that piece because I was so shocked, and we just kept on going. And when I look back and I think back in hindsight, I think, it really wasn't, when he said, "I made you cry," I realized how he was talking about the act of crying, and he was detached from how it affected me, how sexual abuse affected me. And that made me more enraged over time. I went back later on and I listened to it over and over again. And I found it interesting that some people found that he was apologizing, but to me it was so short and so far from an apology. And through that, I realized that he probably could have never said the right words that I needed to hear. I had the power to shift that, and I didn't realize it at the time, but it took me a little while to figure that out.
Have you forgiven your father?
At times I feel like I have 100% forgiven him, and I think what I've learned is that you could forgive and still be angry. It's been a process, and through that years and years of therapy and thinking about this and trying to move on, eventually I did move on and I forgave. I had to do it for me. Otherwise, I could never be free and have peace of mind and be truly who I am. And I felt that I was giving him my power, my energy, by holding on to anger, and truly didn't want to be that person. That's not who I am. So I had to let go and move on.
Do you feel a person needs to forgive to move on?
I do. I really do.
Okay. So what does forgiveness mean to you?
Freedom, peace of mind, peace of heart.
So how do you let go?
So I think it's a process. I don't know how most people go through it, but what I do is I find a quiet place, I sit down, I journal, I think about what happened or what I would like to accomplish, and at times I pray, at times I talk to somebody or ask my husband or a friend. It doesn't happen always quickly, but eventually it dissipates and it just goes away.
Do you think you can forgive someone when you've never received an apology?
Yeah, I do. I think that is probably, out of everything, I think that's the hardest thing, is when you don't receive an apology. And I think a lot of times you think someone's going to give you an apology, but in their mind, they did it right. They were okay. And that you have to find in your heart and realize that you're not going to get an apology. Think about it and slowly move on. And I think that one's a longer process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. If you don't come from a spiritual background and don't have faith, how do you let go and how do you forgive?
Well, I don't think you necessarily have to have faith or be a spiritual person. I really honestly think you just need to be human.
Yeah. Forgiveness doesn't mean no longer feeling pain or anger. Do you feel any pain or anger?
Yeah. At times more and at times less, sometimes not at all. But I get angry when I look at all the obstacles, like if I get triggered from my dad and that would be an obstacle, and I realize that I still have this in my past and it's still present. And it bothers me, it really bothers me, and through that I get angry. But I realize that not everybody could choose their parents, and I just kind of move on.